The year was 1868, and the plains had gone quiet in the wake of killing. Cole Hartigan rode to what used to be a village, ashes and ruins stretching across the valley like a wound. The sun hung pale over the wreckage, a hard light on blackened timbers and broken pottery. The stench of smoke and blood drifted on the wind. Even his horse shied from it. Cole reined in, his jaw set. He'd seen burned towns before, Union camps, outlaw raids, but this was different. Small huts turned to cinders. Children's toys melted into the dirt, the work of men who believed they were saving civilization. He dismounted, boots sinking in the gray dust. The only sound was the brittle whisper of fire, still chewing at the ruins. His orders were simple. Confirm the raid was complete. Nothing survived. But something did. From beneath a collapsed hut came a faint cough. Cole froze, then moved toward it, brushing aside shards of burnt wood. A pair of eyes stared up through the soot, wide, dark, and unblinking. A girl, maybe 8 years old. Apache. Her face was streaked with ash, her lips cracked and bleeding. She clutched something tight against her chest, a half-burned doll made of cloth and straw. He crouched low. "Easy there, little one," he said softly, though his voice was rough from years of dust and whiskey. She flinched, tried to crawl backward, but the rubble pinned her legs. Cole hesitated. Every instinct told him to walk away. Leave her. She was one of them. The same kind that killed his brother near the Salt Fork 3 years ago. But he didn't move. Instead, he dropped his rifle, pried loose the beam trapping her legs, and lifted her out. She was light as smoke, barely breathing. He gave her water from his canteen. She didn't drink, just stare at him with a look that cut deeper than any bullet. Cole stood there in a ruin, the flames whispering around him, and felt something shift inside. He'd lost too much already, his brother, his wife, his own damn peace. Maybe this was the Lord's way of testing what was left of him. He wrapped her in his duster, slung her before him on the saddle, and turned his horse north. Behind him, the smoke rose high into the hard blue sky, and for the first time in years, he didn't know if he was doing right or making the worst mistake of his life. The plains stretched wide and merciless under the afternoon sun. Cole rode with the girl pressed against his chest, her small frame rigid, her eyes open but distant. She hadn't spoken once. He tried a few words, simple ones. Water. Safe. Home. Nothing. She just watched the horizon, lips moving soundlessly, maybe praying, maybe cursing him. By sundown, they stopped at a creek. He built a fire from mesquite branches, cooked what was left of his jerky, and set the food near her. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't even look his way. He sighed, staring at the flames. "You ain't making this easy, little one." She gave no answer. Her silence reminded him of the grave, of the night he'd buried his wife, Lorna, in a storm that near tore the sky apart. She died of fever, and afterward, he'd sworn off everything that breathed. People, kindness, love. Now here he was, feeding a child he should have hated. Sometime after midnight, a pack of coyotes howled across the hills. The girl startled awake, eyes wild. Cole drew his revolver and fired once into the dark, the shot echoing long after the sound died. The coyotes fled. When he turned back, she was watching him, not afraid this time. Curious. He nodded toward the fire. "Ain't nothing out there gonna touch you while I'm breathing." She looked at him a long while before whispering something faint, a single word. "Katsa." He frowned. "What's that mean?" She didn't answer, just curled into herself, eyes half closed. At dawn, they crossed the river, the water cold and fast from the mountain melt. Midway through, the girl suddenly jerked free, diving off the horse with a cry. She tried to swim toward the far bank, but the current spun her around like a rag. Cole cursed and went after her, plunging into the icy rush. The water stole his breath, slammed him into stones, but he found her, small fingers flailing, and pulled her up by the collar. He dragged her to shore, coughing and shaking. When they collapsed on the sand, she looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time. Her small hand touched his arm, just once. Then she began to cry. He sat there, drenched and exhausted, not knowing what the hell to do. But for the first time since the war, something warm pressed against his chest that wasn't pain. By dusk, they rode again. This time, she didn't resist. By the third day, they reached Cedar Bluff, a town that smelled of whiskey, sweat, and suspicion. The sun was low, casting long shadows through the crooked street. Men leaned against posts outside the saloon, watching the stranger ride in with a brown-skinned child in his arms. Cole felt every stare. He dismounted near the trading post, leading his horse by the reins. The girl clung to him, half hidden in his coat. The sheriff, a wiry man named Harlan Cobb, stepped out from his office, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Hardigan, thought you rode with the Army Patrol." "I did," Cole said flatly. "Raid's over." Cobb's gaze drifted to child. "Guess they missed one." Cole's voice hardened. "She ain't their business anymore." A few men nearby muttered. One spat tobacco into the dirt. "You gone soft, Hardigan? Bringing that filth in here." Cole's jaw flexed. "She's a child." The man sneered. "They don't come out the womb innocent, not them kind." Cole stepped forward, slow but deliberate. "Say that again." The saloon went quiet. Nobody did. Cobb sighed. "Cole, you're stirring up trouble you don't need. Best hand her over to fort. They'll take care of her proper." "I seen how proper they take care," Cole said. "Ain't happening." The sheriff studied him a long moment, then nodded toward the boarding house down the street. "Martha Doone might help. Widow woman. Takes and strays now and then." Martha was maybe 30, tired-eyed but kind. She looked the girl over with gentle hands, offered soup and a bed. But the child, still wrapped in Cole's coat, refused to let go. "She's scared, that's all," Martha said softly. "She'll come around." Cole shook his head. "No, she stays with me." Martha looked at him, surprised. "You can't raise her alone." "Can't leave her neither." He went to the courthouse that same evening, signed the papers the clerk pushed across the counter. His name scrawled beneath guardian. It didn't feel right, didn't feel wrong, just final. On the way out, he passed a preacher who gave him a look halfway between pity and condemnation. "You savon her soul, Mr. Hardigan, or losing your own?" Cole didn't answer. That night, he took her home, to a small cabin outside town, a place that smelled of pine and dust. He showed her the cot near the stove, the water bucket, the lamp. She said nothing, only stared around like someone seeing walls for the first time. He lit the fire and sat at the table, rubbing his temples. The silence stretched until it became almost holy. When he looked up, she was standing by the doorway, holding the doll that had survived the fire. Its head was half burned, one eye gone. She clutched it close and whispered a word, soft, trembling. "Mama." Cole froze. He swallowed hard, looked toward the window. The night outside was deep and still, the stars sharp as glass. He felt something stir in that silence, a warning, a promise, maybe both. He rose, moved the door, and looked toward the distant horizon. Somewhere out there, he thought he saw smoke. He told himself it was just memory, but in his gut, he knew better. He turned back to the girl, sleeping now on the cot, the firelight soft on her bruised face. He whispered, half to her, half to the ghost in his head, "You're safe now." But the words felt heavy, hollow, because deep down he knew safety didn't exist out here. Not for men like him, not for girls like her. The wind rose outside, whistling through the gaps in the wood, carrying the faint sound of something distant. Drums maybe, or thunder. Cole sat there long after the fire died, staring into the dark, knowing the story wasn't over. It had only just begun. 2 months passed, and the prairie thawed into spring. Cole Hardigan's ranch stood quiet against a wide horizon, the fences mended, the fields greening under the morning sun. The Apache girl, Tala, had changed. She laughed sometimes now, her laughter sharp and sudden like a creak over stones. She fed the chickens, brushed the horse, followed Cole everywhere like a small, silent shadow. He taught her words. Saddle, river, fire. She'd repeat them carefully, her accent soft and steady. She called him Katsa, still refusing to explain what it meant. For Cole, the days grew slower, easier. the ache that had lived behind his ribs since the war had softened. He'd almost forgotten the burned village, the soldiers' laughter, the smell of smoke. But the frontier didn't let men forget. One morning, as he fixed a fence, a rider came up the trail. It was Sheriff Cobb, hat low, eyes uneasy. He swung down and nodded toward the ranch house. "Need a word, Cole." Cole wiped the sweat from his neck. "Go on." "There's talk. Some folks say they seen an Apache woman out near the dry gulch. Scarred up, traveling, alone. Word is she's been killing bounty men." Cole frowned. "That's so." "She's heading this way," Cobb said. "Army scouts be riding through by week's end. You'd best hand that girl over to fort for her own safety." Cole leaned his forearms on the fence rail, silent for a long moment. "You telling me they'll keep her safe?" Cobb shifted his weight. "Safe enough." Cole's gaze hardened. "No, she stays here." The sheriff sighed. "You always were a stubborn bastard." "Better than a coward," Cole said, voice low. Cobb shook his head, mounted up, and rode off. The dust rose behind him, carrying more than the smell of warning. That evening, Cole watched the horizon from his porch. The sun bled red over the distant desert. He saw a movement far off, just a flicker, like a shape on horseback. Then nothing. Tala tugged at his sleeve. "Katsa," she said softly, pointing east. "I see it," he murmured. And though he didn't know it was coming, something deep in him whispered that the peace they'd built was already breaking. By late afternoon the next day, Cole took Tala fishing down at the river. The sky was overcast, the air heavy with a storm that wouldn't break. The water ran thick and brown from the mountain melt. Tala sat on a rock, humming an Apache, her feet in the shallows. Cole, knee-deep in water, cast his line slow and easy. He hadn't felt this kind of quiet in years. Then a flicker of motion caught his eye. Across the river, half hidden among the willows, stood a woman. Her hair was long and black, streaked with gray and dust. Her skin carried the color of the desert, her body lean and scarred. She wore a buckskin dress torn at the hem, and on her back hung a bow and quiver. Cole's hand went to his gun. The woman didn't move, her eyes fixed on the girl. Tala froze, her humming stopped. Then she whispered something that sounded like a name. Her small feet splashed forward. "Stay back." Cole barked, grabbing her arm. The woman across the river stepped into the open. "Katsa," she said, her voice rough, the word heavy with meaning. "You keep my child." Cole's stomach dropped. "You're her mother." The woman nodded once. "Nate." Her English was broken, but her intent clear. "You take her. You feed her. Now give her back." Cole shook his head. "Can't. The army's watching. You come near town, they'll kill you both." Nature's eyes narrowed. Better death than cage. Before Cole could answer, the faint sound of hooves came from up the ridge. Soldiers. Nate turned toward the noise, then back at him. "You keep her safe," she said, "or you die for her." And just like that, she vanished into the trees, gone as quick as a mirage. Cole stood there, heart hammering, the girl clinging to his leg. The first drops of rain began to fall, cold and thin. He knew then that his quiet life was over. 2 nights later, Cedar Bluff erupted with rumors. The saloon buzzed with talk of an Apache ghost haunting the desert, killing soldiers. By dawn, the army arrived. Captain Dyer and 12 men in blue, hard-eyed and restless. Cole saw the dust from his porch and felt his chest tighten. They reached his gate by mid-morning. Dyer dismounted, his boots polished, his voice clipped. "We're looking for an Apache woman. Been seen near here. You harboring anyone, Mr. Hardigan?" Cole's jaw flexed. "Just me and the girl." "The girl," Dyer said slowly. "That the one you pulled from the raid?" Cole said nothing. Dyer smiled thinly. "Brave thing you did. Foolish, too. She's a reminder of what we're fighting." Cole's temper flickered. "She's a child." The captain shrugged. "Even snakes start small." He turned to his men. "Search the property." Cole stepped in their path. "You set foot in my barn, and I'll put you down before you blink." Dyer studied him, then signaled the men back. You're treading on dangerous ground. Hardigan, harboring hostiles is treason. Then hang me, Cole said. At least I'll swing honest. The soldiers rode off, but their looks promised they'd be back. That night, Cole sent Tal with Martha due to hide in the cellar beneath the old boarding house. The woman hesitated, frightened. They'll come, Cole. They'll burn everything to find her. I'll handle it, he said, but the words were empty even to him. By midnight, lanterns glowed on the horizon. Soldiers coming back. Cole waited inside his cabin, rifle in hand. His heart drummed slow, steady. He wasn't fighting for revenge now. He was fighting for something he didn't know he still had left. Hope. Then the sound of boots. The door burst open. 2 men stormed in. One grabbed the Apache bead necklace lying on the table. Tala's. Proof, the soldier sneered. You've been meeting with her kind. Cole swung the rifle like a club, cracked the man across the jaw, sent him crashing into the wall. The second lunge, and Cole drove him backward through the door into the yard. A pistol fired. Pain tore across his shoulder. He hit the ground, blood warm under his shirt. Before he could rise, more boots thundered. They dragged him to his feet, cuffed his hands, and threw him into the back of a wagon. Cedar Bluff watched in silence as they locked him in the town jail. The sheriff appeared hours later, hat low, eyes heavy. You're going to lose everything, Cole. Ranch, land, that girl. She ain't yours to save. Cole looked up, one eye swollen, voice like gravel. Already lost everything that mattered. Cobb sighed. I tried to warn you. When the sheriff left, the cell went dark. The night stretched long, broken only by the flicker of a single oil lamp down the hall. Cole sat there bleeding, the taste of iron thick in his mouth. He didn't hear the first footstep, didn't see the shadow until it moved. The guard outside slumped suddenly, throat cut. A hand reached through the bars, holding a ring of keys. Cole stared. It was her, Nate. She unlocked the door, pressed a finger to her lips. Quiet. He followed her out into the alley, the smell of smoke and whiskey heavy in the air. The moonlight glinted off the knife in her hand. They moved fast, slipping through shadows until they reached the stables. She saddled his horse with quick, practiced hands. You risked your life for her, Cole said. Why save mine? She met his eyes. Because you saved my child. For a moment, everything else fell away, the war, the blood, the hate. Just 2 broken souls bound by something neither understood. He nodded once. Then we ride. They mounted up and fled into the desert night, dust rising in a silver trail behind them. Hours later, the first glow of dawn broke over the ridges. Cole's arm throbbed, his breath ragged. Nate rode ahead, eyes sharp. When they reached the rise overlooking his ranch, he stopped cold. Smoke, thick, black, rising from the cabin. Nate dismounted first. Crouching low. Soldiers, she said. They come before us. Cole stared at the flames devouring the only home he'd rebuilt from ruin. His heart stuttered. Tala. They spurred their horses forward, the wind biting, ash swirling around them. When they reached the yard, the barn was gone, the corral burned to splinters. There were tracks in the dirt, boot prints, small ones beside them. Nate knelt, touched the ground. The girl lives, she said quietly. But they take her. Cole's fist tightened around his reins. Then we go get her back. He looked once at the smoking ruin behind them, then at the endless desert ahead. This time, he thought, he wasn't saving her out of guilt. He was saving her because she was his. They rode into the rising sun, 2 shadows against the burning sky, one white, one Apache, bound by the same purpose. And as they vanished into the wild, the wind carried the sound of something far off, gunfire maybe, or destiny closing in. The morning broke gray and cold over the high plains, wind whipping dust along the edge of the ranch yard, like a warning from the earth itself. Caleb McGraw stood at the barn door, rifle slung across his shoulder, his jaw tight. He hadn't slept much. Neither had the girl. Little Nita had tossed through the night, murmuring words in Apache, clutching that beaded pouch her mother had left her. She was 11 now, thin as a reed but tougher than she looked. Caleb had seen her stare down rattlers and ride through storms without flinching. But this morning, there was something different in her eyes. Fear, not of thunder or hunger, but the truth that had crept its way to the ranch. Ruth Calhoun rode in just after sunrise, her black coat snapping in the wind. She was 28, a widow from town, sharp-tongued and keen-eyed, the one woman who'd managed to make Caleb feel alive again after years of solitude. But the look on her face told him this wasn't a social call. "Caleb," she said, dismounting, "the U.S. Marshal came through Dry Creek last night. There's talk about that Apache girl you took in. Her mother wasn't just anyone." Caleb's hand tightened around the rifle stock. "What are you saying, Ruth?" She hesitated, looking toward the cabin window where Nita sat watching them. "They say her mother was Tahoma, the same Tahoma who led the raid on Fort Hasker 3 years ago, the woman who killed 7 settlers, including Marshal Briggs' brother." The words hit like a rifle shot. Caleb felt the air leave his chest. "That can't be true," he said. "The woman I found was no warrior. She was bleeding out, holding her child. She was a mother," Ruth said softly, "and a warrior both." The wind gusted, slamming the barn door against the wall. Nita stepped outside, clutching the pouch to her chest. "You talk about my mother," she said quietly, her English halting but fierce. "She not murderer. She protect her people. Protect me." Ruth opened her mouth but closed it again. Caleb felt a deep ache rise from somewhere old and buried. "Nita," he said gently, "sometimes the truth ain't clean, but I know this. Your mama saved you, and that's what matters." Nita shook her head. "They come now," she whispered. "Men with guns. For me." Before Caleb could ask what she meant, the distant sound of hoofbeats rolled across the plain. 5 riders, dust plumes rising behind them. He turned to Ruth. "Get her inside. Now." She didn't argue. Caleb grabbed his rifle, heart hammering. The riders drew closer, lawmen from the look of their coats. At their front, a man with a silver star pinned to his chest. Marshal Briggs himself. Briggs dismounted slow, his eyes sweeping the yard. "McGraw," he said, "you've been harboring an Apache child, the daughter of Tahoma, the same woman who murdered my brother. I'm here to take her into custody." Caleb's grip on the rifle tightened. "She's no criminal. She's a child. Tell that to the graves back at Hasker." Ruth stepped out, her coat whipping around her legs. "Marshal, you can't punish a girl for her mother's sins." Briggs' eyes flicked to her. "Ma'am, the Army's already decided. The girl's to be transported to the fort, questioned, then relocated to a reservation in the territory." Nita clung to Caleb's sleeve. "Please," she whispered, "don't let them take me." And that was all it took. Caleb raised the rifle. "You'll have to go through me." The marshal's face hardened. "Don't be a fool, McGraw. You can't win this." "Maybe not," Caleb said, steady as stone. "But I'll die trying before I hand her over." The standoff held. The wind, the silence, the dust spiraling between them like the desert itself was holding its breath. Then came the first shot. Ruth screamed. Caleb dove, dragging Nita behind the water trough as bullets tore splinters off the porch rail. He fired once, then again. One rider fell. The marshal barked orders. Ruth grabbed a pistol from Caleb's belt and returned fire, the echo rolling through the canyon. For a few minutes, chaos reigned, smoke, gunfire, and shouting. But when the smoke cleared, Briggs' men had fallen back behind the ridge. Caleb's shoulder bled from a graze, his chest heaving. "They'll be back," Ruth said, breathless. "With more men." Caleb looked at the girl, her face streaked with tears and dust. "Then we run," he said, and before the sun touched noon, they were gone. 3 riders cutting across the barren plains, the weight of the past chasing them like thunder on their heels. They rode hard until dusk, pushing through dry canyons and sagebrush valleys. The horses foamed, the sky turning from pale gold to bruised gray. Caleb led the way, jaw locked, every nerve wired for the sound of pursuit. Behind him, Ruth clung to her reins, hat gone, hair whipping loose. Nita rode between them, her small hands gripping the saddle horn, silent except for her quick, shallow breaths. When they reached the ridge, Caleb called a halt. Below lay a narrow creek cutting through the canyon, a good place to rest and hide till dark. They dismounted, the sound of running water mixing with the soft rustle of wind through cottonwoods. Ruth knelt beside Nita. "You holding up, sweetheart?" Nita nodded, though her lips trembled. "They hate me," she whispered. "No," Ruth said softly. "They hate what they don't understand." Caleb watched them, torn between anger and guilt. He thought he could outrun the world's cruelty by keeping to his land, by raising cattle, and minding his own business. But the truth was, you couldn't build fences high enough to keep out hate. Suddenly, a crack echoed through the canyon, not thunder. A rifle shot. "Down!" Caleb shouted. Another shot whined past, splintering bark. Briggs' men had found them. Caleb shoved Nita behind a boulder, firing back across the ravine. Ruth reloaded beside him, steady despite the fear in her eyes. The marshal's voice carried across the canyon. "McGraw, you're making this worse. Hand her over and I'll let you live." Caleb barked a laugh, bitter as gunpowder. "That's a lie and you know it." The firefight roared to life, muzzle flashes lighting the dark. Rocks shattered. Bullets screamed. Then, out of nowhere, a lantern tumbled from a pack horse, shattering near dry brush. The fire caught fast. Flames spread up the slope, licking through sage and grass, wind driving them higher. Smoke rolled thick, choking the air. Caleb grabbed Nita. "Move! Now!" They raced uphill, coughing, half blind from the smoke. Ruth stumbled once, caught herself, and pressed on. The fire's roar drowned out everything, even the gunfire. When they reached the top ridge, the night sky glowed orange behind them. They collapsed by a rocky outcrop, breathless, soot-streaked. Nita turned, tears cutting lines through the ash on her cheeks. "Why they hate us so much?" Caleb knelt, gripping her shoulders. "Because they're scared. People kill what they fear." Ruth looked at him, and in that moment he saw something unspoken pass between them. Understanding. Pain. And maybe something like love, raw and dangerous as fire. But there was no time for softness now. They still had survived the night. By the time dawn broke, they had reached the river, the boundary between the ranchlands and the wild frontier. The air was damp and heavy, the water swollen from recent rain. Caleb knew Briggs wouldn't quit. The marshal would keep coming till one of them was dead. They found a narrow crossing near a fallen tree. Ruth helped Nita down from her horse. "You can do this, sweetheart. Just hold tight." Caleb waded in first, the current biting cold around his knees. The horses splashed behind him. Halfway across, gunfire erupted again from the ridge above. Briggs. Caleb turned, firing back over the river. Bullets tore through the water. Ruth cried out as her horse stumbled. Nita screamed. Caleb reached for them, heart pounding. "Keep moving," he yelled. They made it across, barely. On the far bank, Ruth dropped to the ground, clutching her arm where a bullet had grazed her. Caleb turned, breath ragged, as Briggs rode down the slope toward the river. The marshal's voice thundered across the water. "You can't run forever, McGraw. That girl carries blood that'll curse every soul she touches." Caleb stepped forward, rifle raised. "That girl's got more courage in her little finger than you got in your whole damn body." Briggs drew his pistol, but before he could fire, Nita stepped between them. "Stop," she shouted, voice cracking. "My mother died for peace. You kill me, more hate come, more death." For a heartbeat, the world went still. The river, the wind, the rising sun, all frozen. Then Briggs' gun lowered. His jaw trembled. Caleb saw it, the crack in the man's hatred, the human part buried deep. "Go," Briggs said finally, voice low. "But you'll never have peace. Not out here." Caleb nodded once. "Peace ain't given," he said. "It's earned." He turned, helped Ruth onto her horse, lifted Nita up, and together they rode east into the rising sun. Behind them, the river shimmered gold, washing away the blood and smoke of what had been. Ahead lay miles of wild land, dangerous, uncertain, and free. And maybe that was enough.